Let's begin. A special thank you to Said and Simahakin for dedicating the shir and refreshments this morning. I'm sorry. I threw in the shir also. I think, no such thing as just the refreshments without the shir. It's a package deal. Right? The ruchnius has to go with the gashmius. There's no Le'iloi Nishma Said's grandfather Bashi ben Yaakov HaKohen. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Shama will have an aliyah and the family in the Chama. Shkoyach, and thank you. And also a thank you to Rabbi Yaakov Rappaport, just to be clear, because I don't want any erroneous Shulman hugim developing. This is not a din in the last day of Teves, not a din in the Ravens, not a din in anything. Baruch Hashem, Yaakov is doing Bris Milah today, so as the halacha says, when the moral is present, we do not recite Tachanun. Yaakov, all should be with Hatzlacha. Kadosh Baruch Hu should guide your hand, should guide your neshama. You should be Zoch Emerson to Yimach this little baby into Bris Shal Avram Avinu Bizmano. And we'll say a thank you to Leah's soul for dedicating the shiurim last day of this month in the Schus of Rafur Shalima for her daughter Ilana Bas Esther. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, Ilana together with Kol Choli Yisrael have a complete and enduring refuah. And I will say with that, let's begin. Today's daf is Mem. We are picking up at the Mishnah Lamed Tes Amud Beis, the bottom line, and we'll see a beautiful daf ahead of us today. So it says the Mishnah, Shochet l'shem harim l'shem gavos. We're talking over here now. We kind of made reference to this a little bit in the last sugya that we were discussing about the Shochet la'avodas kochavim. So we're discussing over there the situation where halacha l'maisa, you have the owner of the animal being an Ovid Kochavim, you have the Jew ultimately being a Jew, and so what happens in that type of situation where the owner of the animal has intention for one thing, the actual Shochet has intention for something else, the clash of machshavas, or the clash of kavana. So we'll say, so now we're dealing with a much more explicit case. In this situation, a Shochet l'shem harim, this person is mamish shechting for the purpose of Avodah Zarah. Literally, again, he's worshipping the mountains. L'shem Gavaos for the valleys. L'shem Yamim, L'shem Naros, L'shem Midbaros. He does the Shechita for the sake of the seas, for the sake of the rivers, for the sake of the deserts. What's the halacha? Shechita Sokshera. Psula. But says halacha l'maisa again. So a Shechita for this situation. So Rashi says over the Shem Yamim, Sha'asa Hayam Avodas Chacham. So we'll say in all of these cases, what he's doing over here is he's making these items, the mountains, the valleys, the seas, the rivers, the deserts, into an idolatry. So he's shechting the animal, l'shem this idolatry. But the idolatry in this case, both sides, is not an idol. The idolatry in this case is a mountain, is a valley, is a sea, is a desert. So if he does that, then ultimately, again, the shechita is pasul. The shechita is invalid. Top of Mem Amud Aleph, shnaim ochzin besakin. Both say if you have two people holding a knife together, so actually we made reference to this case already. Two people holding a knife together. Rashi points out, one is holding the blade and one is holding the handle. So we'll say, what's that? And I will say, one of the people holding the knife has in mind ultimately for Avodah Zarah, and one of the people has in mind the knife l'shem davar kasher. We'll say l'shem davar kasher literally means, we'll say, remember, we already established shechita does not require kavana. So when we say l'shem davar kasher, Rashi says shechita stam. In other words, no kavana. As well say, remember again, no kavana is the best kavana for shechita. So what's the? I'm sorry. Jews. So the Gemara says, the shem davar kasher, shchita so psula. Ultimately, again, the shchita is going to be a pulse. So what I say, so the novelty in this case of the Mishnah is that what? Is that halacha l'maisa, even in a case where you have two people actively involved in the shechita, one has erroneous intent for Avodah Zarah, that is enough to compromise the shechita as well. Good. So it says the Gemara, so let's analyze this. So focusing now on the first case. So the Gemara says, psula in, zivche meisim lo. So what's interesting to note is as follows. So case number one in the Mishnah, which seems to be the most straightforward case, is a case of where you have one shochet who's shechting l'shem Avodah Zarah. Right? He's shechting l'shem harim, l'shem gavos, l'shem yam. So again, I will say, remember again, as Rashi points out, he is shechting for these things, for these items, but is endowing these items with an avodah zara identity. So the mountain is my God, the valley is my God, the sea is my God, the desert is my God. So if you do this, ultimately, again, a shecht in the shem avodah zara, the shechita is possible. So the Gemara makes an interesting observation. Psula in, zivchei mesim lo. They're both saying, now the interesting observation is as follows. Psula means that the shechita is not valid. But what doesn't it mean? It doesn't mean that it's aser ba'ano. So you will say, under normal circumstances, when something becomes avodah zara, so not only is the shechita possible, but there's mamish and isser hana, right? You're not allowed to get benefit from it. So the way the Gemara normally would go ahead and identify something like that is to call it zivchei mesim. Ultimately, to go ahead and call it like the carcasses of something dead, which normally is how we refer to avodah zara, which means an isser hana. So psula in the Gemara makes a diuk. The Mishnah only says that if you shech l'shem haram l'shem gavaos, that is psula, but it doesn't say zivchei mesim. Well, say take a look at Rashi, zivchei mesim. Le'aser ba'ano kedin takrovas avodas kochavim sha'asura kemeis. See, I both say under normal circumstances, if you worship some or if you offer something l'shem avodah zara, so that ultimately again doesn't only become puzzle, but it also becomes aser ba'ano. Aser ba'ano is normally termed as zivchei meisim, to which the Gemara says. So urmini borei kasha hashochit l'shum harim l'shum givaos l'shum naros l'shum midbaros. L'shum chama ulevana, excuse me. So we'll say, so again, we quote a brace. What does the brace say? Person shechts an animal, and he shechts it l'shem harim, for the sake of the mountains, for the sake of the valleys, for the rivers, for the seas, for the deserts, for the sun, for the moon. L'shum kochavim umazalos, for the sake of the stars of the constellations. L'shum Michael hasar hagadol. Person shechts an animal and he shechts it again l'shem Michael, the Malach Michael. He's shechting it for Michael, right? The great ministering angel. L'shum shulshul katan. Or for that matter, again, he shechts it for the sake of a small little worm. What's the halacha? Hari elu zivchei mesim. See, Rabbi say here, what does this brisa say? This brisa says if you go out and you shecht it for the sake of the mountains, the valleys, or anything else, the Rabbi say not only is it psula, but what? It's zivchei mesim, it's aser ba'ano. So how do you reconcile this brisa with our Mishnah? Why is it that the Mishnah only says psula vis-a-vis the shechita, which Rabbi say tells us that you can't eat it, but doesn't tell us what? According to the Mishnah, it sounds like what? What's the status of that animal? You can't eat it, but what? You can get benefit for it, get hana from it, yet the Brisa says clearly you can't get hana from it. So what's the pshat? The Brisa is incredible. So Abaye says, Lokashya, it's not a contradiction. How so? Hada amar lahar, hada amar legado dahar. So Abaye says, everything depends on the terminology. Our case in the Mishnah Rabosai is where ultimately, again, he's shechting it for the sake of the mountain itself. Look at Rashi, the amar l'shem har, har eino nasa avodos kochavim. So said, we've learned this concept before in avodah zara. The mountain, a mountain, cannot become idolatry. Why not? Dichsiv Elohehem ala harim, velo harim Elohehem. Because when the Torah goes ahead and discusses the idolatry, it discusses the idea. It's actually referring to when we come into Eretz Yisrael, we have an obligation to wipe out all of the idolatry in the land. So when the Torah refers to the idolatry in the land, it calls it Eloheim ala harim. You have to wipe out their gods which are situated on the tops of mountains. So we'll say this is actually very interesting. The Gemara makes a diuk that is dafka the idols situated on top of the mountains. But the mountains cannot become idolatry. Rashi says, Hilchach lishman lo mekari zivchei mesim, umiyu psula mileachol mishum dedami l'shchidas avodos kochavim, umichlafa ba kedesan lekaman hashochit l'shum nidar v'nidav shchitas. Listen to this. So the Mishnah's case is talking about what? So this is actually, by the way, a very important discussion vis-a-vis avodah zarah in general. That halacha l'maisa, so inanimate objects that are attached to the ground, that are mechubed l'karka, cannot be rendered asr even if someone worships them. I will say, can you imagine the problems we would have? Can you imagine if someone came along and worshipped the mountain, suddenly they can make that mountain into avodah zarah? Let's say again, it would create havoc. So Chazal have a drasha. The drasha is supposed to say that anything that is an inanimate object that is mechuber lekarka cannot be transformed into idolatry. It's only Eloheim al haharim, only the gods on the mountains, velo haharim Eloheim. But the mountains themselves cannot become. We'll say there's one exception to this rule, which is which is Asherah. So we'll say, so Asherah is the exception to this because Asherah itself is singled out. But aside from that, the halacha is able to say that a mountain cannot be transformed into an avodah zarah, right? A sea cannot be transformed into an avodah zarah. So we'll say, so watch this. So the case ultimately, again, of the Mishnah is the case where a person is mamish shechting l'shem hahar. I'm shechting this animal for the sake of the mountain. Well, so what happens in that case? So does that animal become avodah zarah, takrovas avodah zarah? And the answer is no. But because it is being offered up for the sake of avodah zarah, therefore what? It's possible because it's doma avodah zarah. What's the case of the brisa? Rabbi Osai hada amar legada dahar. But say the case of the brisa, where it said that if you offer it up for the har, in fact the animal does become zivchei mesim. What is that? Gada dahar. Rashi says lemalach hamamuna ala harim. So say the brisa case very interesting is what? Where I'm worshiping ultimately, I'm sacrificing the animal for the malach of the har, from the god of the mountain. So it says you hear the distinction. The Mishnah's case is where I'm offering up the animal to the mountain. So if you offer up the animal to the mountain on a technical level, that's not takroves avodah zarah because Eloheim alaharim v'loharim Eloheim. But nevertheless, the animal will be puzzle because it's too close to avodah zarah, but it won't be zivchei mesim. The case of the brayse Rabbi Osai is where I'm offering up the animal for the sake of the god of the mountain, or according to Rashi, God the Dahar means the malach, the angel of the mountain. You offer it up to the angel of the mountain, then what Rabbi say? I'm not offering it up to the mountain. What am I offering it up to? I'm offering it to avodah zarah. Once I offer it up to avodah zarah, then what? Then halacha lamaisa indeed becomes zivchei mesim, not only pasul, but ultimately again aser bana. So the Gemara says, "Dekanami diktani." Says we could bring a good deal between this distinction between the brayse and the Mishnah. Dumya demichal sar hagadol. Because let's remember again in the brayse's case, what do you have? You have l'shum harim, l'shum gavos, l'shum naros, l'shum midbaros, l'shum chamel ulevana, l'shum kachav mazas, l'shum michal hasar hagadol. So the fact that you have Michal Saragadol included in this list indicates to us what? That when a person is worshiping, or I should say offering up the animal to the har and to the givos, he's not offering it up to the mountain or to the valleys, but rather he's offering it up to the malach of the har, the malach of the valleys, the malach of the seas, so on and so forth. Shmamina. So we'll say, so again, so what you have over here is as follows, an incredibly important distinction. The Mishnah's case, I will say, is where a person is offering up an animal, mamish for the sake of the mountain. When you are shechting for the sake of the mountain on a technical level, that is not takroves avodah zarah for one simple reason. The mountain can't become avodah zarah. Nevertheless, the Mishnah paskins, such a shechita is pasul. Not asr bana, but pasul. Why pasul? Because it resembles avodah zarah a lot. But nevertheless, it will not become asr bana. Masha'in kain, if you were to shecht the animal for the sake of the malach of the mountain, the angel of the mountain, the god of the mountain, then what? That becomes mamash avodah zarah. It is not simply pasul, but ultimately again will be called zivchei mesim, will be asr bana. Good. Amar Funa. This is an interesting case. If I come along and my friend's animal was already kneeling in front of avodah zarah. But say, look at Rashi for just a moment. Revutza, lomi by omedes, k'temeshehegbiya v'herbitza kina bagba, v'nasis shalo, ela afagav dirabutza, lo kana, aser la ben maisis. So Rashi points out over here something very interesting. So my friend's animal is kneeling already in front of avodah zarah. So what happens? Kevan sheshachat bas siman echad. Once I go ahead and I shecht even one siman of that animal, asura. Ultimately, again, the animal is aser. Now Rashi points out if I were to go ahead and lift up the animal and then place it down kneeling in front of avodah zarah, we'll say it would go without saying that halacha l'maisa the animal would be aser. Why? Because we'll say the act of lifting up the animal is actually an act of theft. I would acquire the animal through the act, right? A gazlan or a ganav acquires an object through his hakbah. We've seen this extensively. So if I were to lift it up, I would be kona it as a thief and then put it back down in front of avodah zarah. Of course, it would become aser. The novelty in this case, Rabbi say, is I'm not lifting it up. The animal is already kneeling in front of the idolatry. I go ahead and I shecht it. What's the halacha? The halacha ultimately is kevan sheshachat bas siman echad asura. Once I go ahead and I shecht even one similar to that animal is asr as what? Presumably as asr as takroves avodas kochavim. It is already going to be asr as an offering before avodah zara. Okay, so we'll say, so this case is interesting on a variety of levels. Savarla, kiyadam ula. So we'll say apparently Rav Huna subscribes to the position of ula. What does ula say? So kihada amar ula amar Rabbi Yochanan, afa pisha amru hamishtachav lebehemas chaveiro lo asra. So we'll say, even though we said what? If I go ahead and I bow down to my friend's animal. So we'll say, so essentially what I'm doing over here is I'm making my friend's animal into an avodah zara. So even though we said that if someone goes ahead and bows down in front of his friend's animal, lo asra, I have not asra the animal, right? Nevertheless, asa b'maisa asra. If I do something to my friend's animal, in other words, I do a maisa, for example, I shecht my friend's animal l'shum avodah zara, then what? That ultimately again will render the animal unfit as takroves avodah zara. Let's analyze this. Look at Rashi. So we'll say this is actually quite interesting. Even if I go ahead and I worship my friend's animal, so we'll say, let's say again I have a falling out with Ruvain, and I say, you know what, I'm really going to give it to Ruvain. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to worship his animal as avodah zara. I'm going to bow down to it. I'm going to show him. You never say to yourself with craziness, right? Avodah zara is a chi of misa. We'll say people do crazy things all the time to get back at other people, right? Nevertheless, we'll say, Salach, I decide, I'm going to worship my friend's animal in an effort to go ahead and preclude him from getting any benefit. My act of worshiping my friend's animal has no effect on his animal. To the point where we'll say that what? That halacha l'maisa, he could still go ahead and offer it as a carbon. Nevertheless, Ula says that ultimately, again, asa b'maisa asra. If I do something to the animal, then ultimately, again, that has to. Look at Rashi again. Asa b'maisa asra, af lehedyot. So we'll say, see here this interesting distinction. If I mamish worship the animal, so Ula says, I do nothing to impact the status. If I do a maisa to the animal, then I do change the identity and the status of the animal. Look at Rashi. Asa b'maisa asra, af lehedyot. So we'll say, you understand the novelty of this? So we'll say, the chiddush over here is like this. If I go ahead and I bow down to Ruvain's animal, and I worship it as avodah zara, so what's the status of the animal? What's the status? Unchanged. To even the point that what? Ruvain could take that very animal and offer it up as a carbon. Yet, if I do a maisa to that animal, Rabosai, then what? The status is fundamentally changed to the point that it's asra afilu lehedyot. Not only can Ruvain not offer that animal up as a carbon, but what? He himself cannot get any benefit from the animal. The animal mamish becomes takroves avodah zara. Look at Rashi. Af lehedyot v'tayim yalaf b'masachas avodah zara mikola kelim asher izniach hamelach achaz b'malchuso b'ma lo echanu v'amar mar mahichanu shegonzum da'asirei bahana v'af agav delav didei chavu sheklishas. Well, listen to this. Where do we learn this out from? Ula learns this out from King Achaz. Achaz, unfortunately, again, was a Rasha, worshipped avodah zara, and what he did, tragically enough, is he took the utensils of the Beis Hamikdash and used them for avodah zara purposes. Achaz dies, and what do? They took all of the utensils of the Beis Hamikdash and they put them in geniza. They had to store them away. In other words, they were unusable. And I will say, here's what's interesting. The kelim of the Beis Hamikdash did not belong to Achaz. Yet what? The fact that Achaz used them for avodah zara nevertheless rendered them unfit. Ula says, what do you see from here? You see from here that when you take something which does not belong to you and you use it for avodah zara, what happens? The item itself becomes unfit not only for sacrificial use, but any kind of use. So Rabbi say, this is the interesting statement of Ula. So Ula therefore says, Rabbi say, take this back to a simple case. I bow down to my friend's animal, and I say, animal, you are my new God, right? You're my new avodah zara. What happens? Rabbi say, what's the impact of that worship? Nothing. Nothing. The animal is totally unimpacted to the point Rabbi said that it could even be used mamish for a carbon. But if I do a maisa, if I do something, ultimately, again, then what? To my friend's animal, that fundamentally changes the status of the animal, making it into an avodah zarah animal to the point that not only does it become precluded for sacrificial use, but it even is precluded for regular, mundane, everyday use. Where does Ula get that from? Mamish from Achaz. So we have historical precedents for that. Achaz dies, we can no longer use the utensils of the Beis HaMikdash. Why? Because Achaz used them for avodah zarah, even though what? Achaz was using utensils which were not his. So that is shitas ula. You bow down to your friend's animal, you've done nothing. You do a ma'isa to your friend's animal, you've done everything. Eisvei. Eisvei Nachal Rafuna. So we'll say Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman raises a kasha to ula. So we'll say, so what's the kasha? So we'll say, so again, just to understand the progression over here. So remember, Rav Huna is saying over here that halacha lemaisa, if my friend's animal was already kneeling before avodah zarah, and what? I shecht, even what? Even one siman in front of that idolatry, then what? The animal is aser. Right? The animal is going to kevan sheshach basiman echad asura. Right? Where does Rav Huna get that from? Rav Huna gets that from the shita of ula. Right? Ula, because Rabbi say the assumption over here is the animal is kneeling before the avodah zarah. Shechting one siman is an act of worship to the avodah zarah. Rav Huna says ula is of the opinion that if you do a maisa to your maisa avodah zarah to your friend's animal, it answers the animal in its totality. That's the progression. So it says the Gemara Eisha Nachman Rav Huna. So Nachman is Rav Huna. What did he say? Hashoch, listen, this is a great case. Hashoch it chatos b'Shabbos b'chutz la'avodas kochavim. It's a busy Shabbos. Well, so listen to this. I shecht a carbon chatos on Shabbos outside of the Beis HaMikdash for avodah zarah. Mamish, if you need to get a hobby if you're doing stuff like this, right? Rabbi say, so again, so right, what happens? What's the halacha? Chayiv shalosh chatos. Rabbi say, for that act, I am chayiv 3 chatos offerings. Rabbi say, what am I chayiv for? Let's go through this. What am I chayiv for? Number 1, shechita b'Shabbos, right? Shechita b'Shabbos. Number 2, shechita b'chutz, right? And number 3, shechita ultimately again for avodas kochavim, for avodah zarah. So we'll say ultimately again, I am chayiv 3 chatos for this act. So it says, well, let's analyze this. V'i amrit kevan sheshachad basiman echad asura. But we'll say, if it's as you write, Rafuna, if you are correct as saying that once you go ahead and you shecht one siman, then what Rabbi say? Then that animal is already avodah zarah, right? If that is correct, that once you shecht one siman, then ultimately again the animal is already avodah zarah. Then ultimately again shchutei chutz lo mechayiv. Then halacha lemaisa what? I should not be chayiv for shchutei chutz. Now look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says shalosh chatos. Last Rashi number Aleph, Rashi says, "B'shogeg mishum Shabbos." Now obviously this case is shogeg, right? This is one doozy of a shogeg, right? I forgot that it's Shabbos. I didn't know that it's asur to shecht karbanos outside of the Beis HaMikdash, and I didn't realize that it was asur to shecht for avodah zarah. This highlights the importance of paying attention in shir, right? Because right, mamish, like if you could have a person who's such an ama aretz that literally, and again, you'd be surprised. People go through life not knowing fundamental information, not because they didn't have the opportunity to learn, but because they were asleep at the wheel. So let's say, but nevertheless, this is halacha l'maisa case of shogeg. Three shogegim. So Rashi says, mishum shochet kachim ochotz, mishum avodas kacham shloshton bekaris, umishum mekalkel o mifter b'shabes, shai metakno eitzel b'nei noach shevu nechai. Fine. So let's say, so watch this. So it says the Gemara. So look, right, so I'm shechting, so again it's Shabbos, and I'm shechting a chatos outside of the Beis HaMikdash for avodah zarah. I have done 3 kares bearing prohibitions, and therefore I'm chayiv 3 chatos. 1 chatos for shechting on Shabbos, 1 chatos for shechting b'chutz, 1 chatos for shechting for avodah zarah. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. Rav Huna, if you are correct that halacha l'maisa, once you shecht even 1 siman of an animal for avodah zarah, that animal is already what? That animal is already takroves avodas kochavim, then what? Ashchutei chutz lo chayiv. The Rebbe say, I should really knock off the violation for what? Shechting a carbon outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Why? Amadeus? Because once you go ahead, ashchutei chutz lo mechayiv, mechatech ba'afaru. Because the Rebbe say, essentially, again, I'm cutting dirt. What is it? Cutting dirt. Look at Rashi. Mechatech ba'afru techevan din esar mishum avodas kochavim paka shem kachir. We'll say, you hear this chap? This is great. So we'll say, if you hold like Rafuna, listen to how incredible this is. If you hold like Rafuna, we'll say, what was Rafuna's case? Let's go back. Quick review. What was Rafuna's case? Good. Right? The animal of my friend is kneeling before the avodah zarah. I come over to it, and what do? I cut a siman. Once I cut one siman, what have I done? I'm in violation for shechting and offering for avodah zarah. So you see, I will say, then the animal becomes takrovet avodas kochavim after when? After the cutting of one siman. Then I will say, technically speaking, you are only chayav for shchutei chutz when? 2 simanim, a full shchita. So if that's the case, in this case over here, where what? Where I'm shechting on Shabbos, a chatos outside of the Beis HaMikdash. So we'll say, the Gemara says, I'm chayiv for 3 chatos. 1 for Shabbos, 1 for shchutei chutz, and 1 for avodah zarah. But it's not true. Because halacha l'maisa, once I shecht one siman, I have now effectively shechted an animal for avodah zarah. We'll say, once the animal becomes avodah zarah, then what? Then it's no longer a sacrificial animal. If it's no longer a sacrificial animal, we'll say, then what? I should not be chayiv for shchutei chutz. Because before the liability for shchutei chutz kicked in, that animal became takroves avodas kochavim. So we'll say, so there's good news and bad news, right? The bad news is, I shechted an animal for avodah zarah. The good news is, that animal becomes takroves avodas kochavim before I have a chance to violate shchutei chutz. Because remember again, shchutei chutz, we assume only kicks in when there's a bona fide shchita. There's only a bona fide shchita when? 2 simanim. Avodas kochavim kicks in when? Even 1 siman. In which case I will say the good news is I should only be chayiv 2 chatos. Great case. So Papa says, no. Don't get excited. Hacha b'chatas ha'of askinan. Oh, we'll say easy answer. What are we dealing with over here? Chatas of, we'll say again. Chatas of, how many simanim dini for chatas ha'of? Oh, 1 siman. We'll say dekulhu bahadi hadadi ka'asi. So we'll say, remember again, chatas of is a great case because everything is occurring at once. With that 1 siman, I will say, I have chilul Shabbos, I have shchutei chutz, and I have takroves avodas kochavim. So we'll say, let's analyze this. Rav Huna kiman amar l'shmaite. We'll say, so let's go back for just a moment. So what was Rav Huna's case? Rav Huna's case was, my friend's animal is kneeling before avodah zarah. I come along and I shecht a siman of that animal. What's the halacha? The halacha is ultimately, again, the animal becomes aser as takroves avodas kochavim. So now what we're saying, Rabbi Say, is that, so now watch this. So according to who did Rav Huna say his opinion? Command Amr Shraite, Ku'ula, right? Ula, and Rabbi Say, what did Ula say? V'ula, Maisa kolduhu ka'amar. The Rabbi Say, remember again, Ula's shita, as we saw it, was what? Ula said, Afapi shamra mishtachav elem mischaver lo asra, asa ba maisa asra. We'll say Ula's of the opinion that once you do any level of maisa to your friend's animal, what happens? It becomes asr as takroves avodas kochavim. Ula does not require, Rabbi say, a whole bona fide halachic maisa. Ula says a maisa kolduhu. So we'll say if that's the case, Ella. So we'll say if that's the case, then what? If that's the case, we'll say then what? Then what we have over here is as follows. Setting it up as a bird chatas, setting it as chatas off actually doesn't help you. Why? Because I will say, according to Ula, as soon as you do any ma'aseh for avodah zarah, then what? The animal becomes aser. So we'll say, once I take that knife to make the first incision, if I'm doing it the Shem avodah zarah, according to Ula, that animal becomes avodah zarah. If that animal becomes avodah zarah, then what? You're no longer chayiv for shchutei chutz. So we'll say, which again is good news for the violator, but is bad news for the case, because the way the case is being set up is I am doing something on Shabbos which generates triple liability: Shabbos, shchutei chutz, and avodah zarah. The problem is, according to Ula, you're never going to have a case ultimately again where you're going to be chayiv for both avodah zarah and shchutei chutz. Why? Because according to Ula, the liability for avodah zarah kicks in when? Essentially immediately. Whereas the liability for shchutei chutz really only kicks in when when you mamish do a bona fide act of shchita bachutz. But the problem is, once the animal becomes avodah zarah, it's no longer shchutei chutz. Those two liabilities cannot coexist. So we're kind of back to square one. How do you ever have a case of triple liability? Again, I will say, the only reason we're trying so hard to figure this out is because we have a brisa. And the brisa says, so we'll say, when you have a brisa like this, that without any attribution, it sounds like what? It's a devrei akol. So the only problem now is you just have to figure out how this case would work according to Ula, or according to Rav Huna / Ula, because according to Ula, ultimately, again, the liability for avodah zarah kicks in as soon as you do even small maisa. The chiyuv for shchutei chutz only kicks in once you have a complete shchita. And according to Ula, where do you ever have these two concepts come together? To which the Gemara says, Ella ba'omer b'gemar zvicha. So I'll say, what's the case? This is actually very interesting. The case would have to be Rabbosai, where a person makes an explicit intention, explicit stipulation, and he says, I'm hereby offering up this animal for avodah zarah, but it should not be offered up until for avodah zarah until when? Until the end of the shechita. See, Rabbosai, you could make a stipulation like that I'm offering up this animal for avodah zarah, but the avodah zarah designation does not take place until the end of the shechita. Rabbi say, if you have that, then what? Then you have simultaneity of all the different things. So then Rabbi say again, you have Chiv Shabbos. Chiv Shabbos is not really the problem in all of this. That's the easy part. But ultimately, again, both the Shchutei Chutz as well as the Avodah Zarah essentially devolve upon the animals simultaneously. So if you say that the designation should not take place until Gemar Shchita, ultimately it works. Ihachi. So we'll say, if that's the case, the truth is you don't have to set this up as a bird chatos then, right? So we'll say, if that's the case, you don't have to set it up as dealing with a bird chatos where you only need one siman. This will work perfectly fine with what? Even with a full-fledged carbon, right? Just a regular zevach. No. What's the case? Here we go. Kigon shahaya chatzi kana pagum. I will say, watch this. This is great. You're dealing still with a bird chatos. Half of the trachea was cut already. So let's remember again, we've already seen this, although we'll discuss this more in the Eilutrefus. We'll say the halacha by the kana, by the trachea, is that what? Even if 50% of it is perforated already, right? Halacha l'maisa, that is not a treifa. That animal is still okay. And halacha l'maisa, all you would need to do in that kind of case is what? Cut a little bit, right? Cut a little bit in order to render it geshacht. So we'll say, what's the case? Kigon shaya chatzi kana pagum v'hosif alav kolshu v'gamru dekulu bahadi hadadi ka'asyan. We'll say beautiful, right? The world is back in prohibited equilibrium, right? In Avarian equilibrium. We'll say, what's the case over here? I'm taking a bird which has a kana, which is 50% already cut. I take it outside on Shabbos and I shecht it and I do a little cut. So we'll say, what happens? In that moment, all three prohibitions are devolving upon me simultaneously. What have I done? A, I've violated Shabbos. B, I've shechted for avodah zarah. And C, I've done shchutei chutz. And in that case over here, because everything is occurring simultaneously, all three prohibitions could devolve upon me. So remember again, just to understand, the issue we're trying to avoid over here is having the animal become takroves avodos kochavim before it becomes shchutei chutz. Because once it becomes takroves avodos kochavim, it cannot become shchutei chutz. Once you have avodah zarah, you are removed from the parsha ultimately of karbanos. Like this Shabbosai, where the kana is already 50% perforated, with that one little cut, everything is occurring simultaneously. I violated Shabbos, shchutei chutz, and avodah zarah. Amar Rav Papa, so Rav Papa says, Ilav de Amar Rav Huna, simin echad lo havya chatos. Right? So ultimately, again, so the Gemara says, I'm sorry, go back. So Amar Rav Papa, so Rav Papa says as follows. Rav Papa says, Ilav de Amar Rav Huna, simin echad lo havya chatos, tiyufte mai maisa. So ultimately, again, maisa, so the Gemara says, so listen to this, so the Gemara says as follows. So Rav Papa says, if we're not for the fact that Rav Huna said that simin echad, right? Lo avyechatos. Then ultimately, again, tiyufte. I said, we'll say, how would we go ahead and ultimately understand this exchange? To which the Gemara says, my sirabba, v'amar papa, ilav de amar avuna, behemas chavero lahavyechatos, tiyufte. My taima didei matzi aser dechavre lo matzi aser. So we'll say. So let's go back for just a second. I'm sorry, I read that quickly. So the Gemara says, look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says, "Ilav dam Rav Huna simin echad." We'll say if you look, it's in the wide lines in Rashi, 2, 4, 6 lines down. Ilav dam Rav Huna simin echad va'asid aduula demaisa kol du amar. So we'll say, remember again. The issue we're running into over here is the combination between Rav Huna and Ula. So Rav Huna is the one who started out by telling us the case of Haisa behemas chaver ravutza fnei avodas kochavim kevan sheshachat ba simin echad. So Rav Huna's whole thing about say is what? Is a simin echad. Ula's whole thing is what? Is what? A maisa, but maisa what? Maisa kol duhu. See, what's interesting to note is as follows. So look at that Rashi again. So Amar Ilav da Amar Rav Huna simin echad va'asid aduhula va'asid aduula demaisa kol duhu Amar. See, see now if Rav Huna was not juxtaposed, Rav Huna himself says simin echad. Ula says, "Amaisa kol duhu." Look at Rashi. Lo havyechatos tiyufte. So we'll say if that's the case, if Rav Huna did not say simin echad, and ultimately juxtapose his statement to the statement of Ula, which says amaisa kol duhu, then what? Lo havyechatos tiyufte. Du'ula mereisha ki avasaka daitcha de behema kai. So we'll say, were it not from the fact that ultimately the statement of Rav Huna was juxtaposed to the statement of Ula, so I would have said as follows. Rav Huna is telling me simin echad. We'll say simin echad is a ma'aser rabba, is something significant. Ula is the one who's coming along and saying what? That halacha l'maisa, all you need is some type of maisa. The whole reason we have to go ahead and reinterpret Rav Huna's statement, Rabbi say, is why? Because halacha l'maisa, Ula comes along and tells me that even the smallest of maisim goes ahead and makes this animal fit for avodah zarah. So the Gemara says, "My taima didei matzi aser, my taima didei matzi aser, dechavre lo matzi aser." We'll say ultimately again, because what do we say is Rav Huna's logic? A person could go ahead and aser their own animal, but to be able to aser someone else's animal, Rabbi say, where do we see this? So Pshita, the Gemara says that's obvious. B'mo or I've said, Kevan dekanile lekapara kididei damya. So I would have thought as follows. I would have thought that when it comes to an animal, ultimately, which is being offered up for my kapara, I might have thought that halacha l'maisa, that has the status of something which belongs to me. That's the novelty over here. Sibbo said, this is actually quite fascinating, that ultimately, again, when I'm offering up an animal for sacrificial purposes, does that animal belong to me or not? To which the Gemara says, I might have thought, ma'udetema, kevan dekanile le kapara, kidi di damya. I might have thought that halacha l'maisa, since it's being offered up for my kapara, that halacha l'maisa belongs to me. Kamashon that is not the case. Kamashon Rabbi say that if an animal does not belong to me, right, even though it's being offered up for my kapara, I do not have the ability to go ahead and aser it. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Tikanele the kapara, shabayla miskaprin ba. Sibbo said the havamina is that if something is providing kapara for me, maybe halacha l'maisa it should belong to me. Kamashon it does not, and therefore again I would not have the ability to go ahead and aser it. Rav Nachum and Rav Ram and Rav Yitzchak coming. So both say, here we go. So both say, now what we have over here is as follows. What we have is, so first of all, we've established ultimately the case of simultaneity, 3 different isurim of Shabbos, Shchutei Chutz, and Avodah Zarah, all devolving at once. We've also established the shitos of Rav Huna, who also ultimately builds on Rav Papa and Rav Huna's shita, that halacha l'maisa, again, once I go ahead and I shecht one simin of my friend's carbon in front of avodah zarah, that asers it. I have Ula ultimately telling me that what? That halacha l'maisa, once I did a maisa to my friend's animal, or I should say, to behemas chaver, even though if I bowing down to it is not enough, doing a maisa to it will aser it. Then Abosai, building on that, the Gemara says, Ranachar Aaron bar Yitzchak Amri. Ein Adam Oser Davar She'eno Shelo. So we'll say now we have Rav Nachman, Rav Amon, and Rav Yitzchak who say a person cannot answer something which does not belong to them. Look at Rashi for just a moment. It's Rashi in the wide lines, obviously. 5 lines up for the bottom. Afilu bigmar maisa ve'istim afarshe b'maisa kol duhu velohi de'imkein lo havi minasech tiyuf tayu d'chol. Fine, we'll get to that in just a second. So we'll say, now these opinions are coming along and saying that halacha l'maisa, I cannot answer something which belongs to someone else. Afilu b'gemar maisa. We'll say even with some type of significant maisa, I do not have the ability to answer something which does not belong to me. Meisvei, the Gemara raised the kasha. So we'll say, is that true? Hashochet chatos b'shabes b'chutz la'avodos kochavim chayiv shalosh chatos. So we'll say, remember, what did we say before? I go ahead and I shakt on Shabbos chatos. So we'll say, so just to be clear what's happening over here. I'm shechting a carbon chatos. I'm taking an animal which was designated as a carbon chatos. I'm shechting it on Shabbos, b'chutz, for avodas kochavim. So what's the halacha? Chayiv shalosh chatos. Okay, we've already established this. I'm chayiv 3 chatos offerings. 1 ultimately again for Shabbos, 1 for avodah zara, 1 for shchutei chutz. V'ukminon bechatos of u bechatzi kanapagum. They're both saying, so what did we say before? So one of the ways which we interpreted this is talking about a chatas sof, which only requires what? 1 siman. The trachea, right? The kana is already halfway cut. Therefore, again, all they need is a little bit of an additional cut, so there's simultaneity. So taima, the chatas ha'ofu, the kulu bahadi hadadi kasi. So as we've said already, we established this chatas ha'of already, half a kana is cut, and therefore there's simultaneity. Top of mem aleph. Aval zevach lo. Now watch this. But halacha l'maisa, if it was a full-blown carbon, a regular carbon, this would not work. Look at Rashi. Aval zevach davar hazavuach b'sakin dahainu behema da'of maloku. So we'll say, remember again, if this was a full-blown carbon, it wouldn't work. Now, remember again, why wouldn't it work? Why wouldn't it work? Because halacha l'maisa, then you would not have simultaneity, right? So the Gemara says, I don't understand. V'i ein adam oser davar she'eno shalo, ma'ir yachata sa'of, afilu chatas behema nami. The boss says, so understand what the Gemara is saying over here. If you tell me that it's true that a person cannot answer something that is not theirs, then I will say, let me ask you a question. So let's, again, it's me. I'm taking my chatas. I'm shechting it outside, ultimately, again, on Shabbos, Haravodas Kachavim. I will say, should I have the ability to go in and compromise the chatas? Does the chatas belong to me? So we'll say, no. This is actually quite amazing. A carbon chatas does not belong to me. Who does the carbon chatas belong to? HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or to the Kohen, right? Really, you're both saying it belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's kachim. It's kachim. So this is actually quite amazing. The Gemara is saying over here, we've spent all of this time going ahead and trying to figure out how to go ahead and figure out simultaneity of Shabbos, Avodah Zarah, and Shchutei Chutz. But I will say, so remember again, it's fine. It's fine. Why? Because obviously we're operating with this sheet of Ula. But we'll say, what does Ula clearly hold? Although he doesn't say it explicitly, what does he clearly hold? That you can answer something that does not belong to you. Because we'll say, what did Ula say? Ula's shita was Asra. So we'll say, Ula says you can answer something that doesn't belong to you. But now comes along the Gemara, quotes Rav Nachman, Rav Amar Yitzchak, who hold Ein Adam Oser Davar She'eno Shalo. So we'll say, if you can't answer something that does not belong to you, Kachim, Achatos, does not belong to me. If that's the case, how do I have the ability to answer it? It's a good kasha. To which the Gemara says, I'll tell you why. Kevan dekanyele lekapara kididi damya. This is actually amazing, because the Gemara suggests that halacha l'maisa, since I achieve atonement through this chatos, that vests me with some level of ownership over it. Not enough ownership ultimately to do whatever I want, but at least enough ownership to do what? To asr. Look at Rashi. Kevan dekanyele lekapara sharei habaydim miskaprimba. But say, since I achieve atonement ultimately through this animal, therefore halacha l'maisa, again, I have the ability to go ahead and asr it as well. So we'll say, we'll stop over here for today, but just understand, and we will resolve this tomorrow. We're ending off with a couple of very important yisodistic ideas. First of all, perhaps the most yisodistic machlokes, which is, does a person have the ability to asr something which does not belong to them? Ula clearly says yes. Rav Nachman, Rav Amram, Rav Yitzchak say no. Now I will say so that machlokes exists in a vacuum. What we clearly see is that halacha l'maaseh again. So that's machlokes number one. And I will say that machlokes has many different ramifications, but for our purposes today, that machlokes is: can I go ahead and turn my friend's animal into an animal of avodah zarah? Right? They will say, my friend's animal is crouching before avodah zarah. I come along and shecht it. So what's the status of that? Right? So obviously, I'm going to have to repay him. But the Shara says, what do I have to repay him? Do I have to repay him for an animal that is asur b'ano, or do I have to repay him just for an animal that was alive and is now dead? Machlokes Ula and Rav Nachman, Rabbi Yitzchak, and Rav Amram. So again, we'll see the resolution to that in Miras Hashem tomorrow. What else do we see? We'll say we saw the case of simultaneity of liability. How you can have a case ultimately of what? Of shechting one animal and be chayiv ultimately again for Shabbos, avodah zarah, and shchutei chutz. We set that simultaneity up in a couple of different places. What we've also seen, I will say something quite fascinating. Even if you hold in adam oser davar she'eno shelo, that your person can't asa, it does not belong to them, and even though a carbon technically, remember again, the Gemara doesn't ask this shaila by shlamim. Because Rabbi says shlamim does belong to me. Why? Because I get meat from the shlamim. That's why the Gemara sets up this case with a chatas. Chatas, I get nothing from it. But you see from here that even a chatas which does not belong to you, nevertheless, because you achieve atonement through it, that vests me with some level, some degree, ultimately again of ownership. So I'll say what we do ultimately with the machlokes of ein adam oser davar she'eno shelo. Do I have the ability to ask something that does not belong to me? Machlokes. And then we'll see the resolution tomorrow. We'll say just a reminder, tomorrow's Rosh Chodesh, so the daf begins at 5:45 tomorrow.